Hey Piedmont Opera fans, it's Jamie Albritton. Welcome to La Lunch, the virtual dish on opera. I'm really excited to be here. I hope you can see in the background, we're actually at Footnote Cafe, just like we always are for La Lunch. We're trying to be in the midst of this pandemic just about as normal as we can be, and we're very grateful to Footnote for giving us this space this afternoon. We also want to remind you, Footnote's open now. Once we went into phase 3, they were able to open. I think they were actually in phase 2, so they're here waiting for you, and hopefully we'll soon be able to all be down here for a new La Lunch. But for right now, we're going to be good with the virtual La Lunch because we are also virtually producing opera, aren't we? So let's unpack just a little bit. We're embracing the virtual pivot of it all as we are seeing each other from the Footnote Cafe, but not actually in person. We miss you. It's a big open room right now. What is our goal here? Our goal is to say that in the midst of a pandemic, we're doing our best to follow our mission and to stay as normal as we can. Piedmont Opera's mission is to create operatic productions of the highest artistic quality to enrich our community and to advance the art form. And I really believe with us pivoting this way, keeping on our regular schedule and producing operas for our community and doing it in a very new way, we're actually, certainly within the boundaries of Piedmont Opera, we are advancing our art form. So that's our goal, is to bring a little touch of operatic normalcy to our lives and to, at the same time, explore this new technology as we are all facing the challenges of the pandemic. So with that in mind, let's get to our project and our subject for today's La Lunch, the dish on opera. So, in terms of trying to produce opera during COVID, we have some of the same challenges that we all have while going out into public. We are all social distancing. We are all trying to keep our 6 feet of distance. I have my mask. I just took it off here while I'm talking to you. For singers, it's even more complicated because we take deeper breaths and because we try to project our voices so much more. We have to be 12 feet apart from each other. So what are the implications for producing opera like that? Well, there are several. One is I need a big room because I've got to get every singer that's singing 12 feet apart from each other so that that spray isn't going into everybody else's sort of breathing patterns. And what's the other challenge? The other challenge is I can't have a lot of people on stage. If I have a big chorus full of people and principals and secondary roles, how am I going to keep them all 12 feet apart? We're going to end up on 5th Street or maybe down over on University Parkway. So, my challenge is keep everybody safe and still produce something exciting. Because we are coming, as we always are, from the Stevens Center, and that's our first bonus, is that we have the Stevens Center at our advantage, so we've got that big room already. So, maybe some of you saw our Magnolia Ball that was also virtual. At that Magnolia Ball, my dear friend Kenneth Brazel came and accompanied, composer Kenneth Brazel, came and accompanied Jody Burns on a selection of his folk songs. And you know, I've always loved Ken's folk songs. I've always described them as little mini operas. And I've always wanted to try to turn one of them in particular into an opera. Ken's like, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. But nonetheless, it left me with an idea. Could I put that on, would that be something that I could put on our stage? So I started thinking about it. And as I started thinking about it, as I've already said, I can't have a lot of people on stage at once. 4, 5, 6, 7 max, right? And I remembered a beautiful opera called Slow Dusk, written by Carlisle Floyd. It has 4 people in it and tells quite a beautiful story. And I thought to myself, what if we paired that one-act opera, Slow Dusk, with 4 people in it, cast of 4, with something that we could do with Ken's folk songs. They're so beautiful, and they tell such compelling stories. I think there's something there. I went to Ken, I talked to him, and he said, I love the idea, let's do it. And then I next went to Gary Taylor, who is the founder and artistic director of Winston-Salem Festival Ballet. And I said, Gary, I have an idea that we could do something with Ken's folk songs where two singers, a he and a she, would sing all of the songs, and you could dance the stories on stage as we sort of narrate them. Just like Ken, Gary loved the idea and he jumped on board. And suddenly we have this beautiful duet of performances that we are calling Echoes from Carolina. And Act 1 is Carlisle Floyd's Slow Dusk, and Act 2 is a piece that we've created from Ken Frizzell's folk song settings called From Appalachia. So that's our menu. Now let's dive into this a little bit, and I'm going to invite some guests to talk to me about this as well. But let's talk first about the first half of our performance, Slow Dusk. Now I hope that some of you are familiar with the name Carlisle Floyd. Carlisle Floyd is, some would call him the father of, some call him the dean of American opera. One way or the other, he is one of our leading voices, whether you want to call him the father of American opera or the dean of American opera. He is one of our leading, if not the leading, American voice in opera. Potentially, one of the reasons that he is considered that is because he was one of the first American composers to have a real international success with an opera. If I say Susanna to you, ring any bells for anybody? Perhaps more importantly, if I talk to you about Renee Fleming singing Ain't It a Pretty Night, which I believe she recorded on her I Want Magic CD, perhaps that will ring bells. That's the music of Carlisle Floyd. Carlisle Floyd, part of the reason we call our double bill Echoes from Carolina is because Carlisle Floyd was born in South Carolina. He was born in 1926 in Latta, South Carolina. And Latta actually is close enough to North Carolina, I think we ought to own him, but I digress. If you go down to Laurinburg and then just drive a little southwest, you're going to find Latta. So it's not that far over the North Carolina border. He was born there in 1926. His father was a Methodist minister, and his mother was a pianist. So there was an awful lot of church in his background. And of course, Methodist ministers are itinerant. They're always moving. So he moved from location to location and really got to drink in sort of that Southern culture as he was growing up. To continue sort of that homeboy, he's ours, he's from North Carolina, he got his undergraduate degree at Converse College in South Carolina. But then after that, his composition teacher suggested that he go to Syracuse for graduate work up in North Carolina. He went up there and he worked very hard, both as a pianist and as a composer. In point of fact, there were times in his career when his piano teacher was thinking that the composition was getting just a little bit too far forward, and of course it was. That would turn out to be his career. While he was at Syracuse, he started, well, there were two things that happened. First of all, he was also interested in writing. Carlisle Floyd is the librettist, or he writes all of the text for his operas himself. And while he was at Syracuse, he had taken creative writing when he was at Converse. And when he came to Syracuse, there was an extracurricular activity that you could take to do creative writing and to be in the school's magazine, literary magazine. So he applied for it, and indeed he gained a position there. And in his last year of studies there, he wrote a 5,000-word short story, and that short story was called A Lengthening Shadow. And that short story would go on to become the subject for his first opera, Slow Dusk. And I want to read to you a relatively recent biography about Floyd here called Falling Up. It's a wonderful book. And in it, he talks about Floyd writing the short story. When Floyd started writing, as most writers do, it's like, write from what you know, write something you know. And so he chose to go back to his roots, where he grew up with his father as a Methodist minister and his mother and the church pianist, and all of the travels that he did with them as an itinerant preacher. And from his book is written The Shadow, so the lengthening shadow. The shadow girl's romantic involvement with a boy from a different religious group mirrors Romeo and Juliet in South Carolina garb. So, from the short story into our opera Slow Dusk, we're seeing sort of Romeo and Juliet in a South Carolina garb. I like to say Romeo and Juliet down in the holler. So that's our premise. Author goes on. Floyd's maternal grandmother, Catherine Cottingham, and grandfather, Oscar Finnegan, had braved enmity between Methodists, later Christian Scientists, and Baptists. Having experienced religion as the bastion of Southern women, Sibyls who sniped at any order that strayed from theirs, Carlyle recalled the doom-promising roadside billboards of Washfoot Baptists, True Lights, and Disciples of Christ. Though he never cultivated friends from these groups, Bethune's school had its contingent of bus kids from such families driven in from outlying farms. For his story's finale, Carlyle summoned up years of long country rambles and sinister dark ponds masking gnarled tree roots of which he, Carlyle, as a boy, was warned. So that's the basis of his story, The Lengthening Shadow, and it wouldn't take him long to turn The Lengthening Shadow into his opera, Slow Dusk. So since this is new territory for us, let's cover the story in a little bit of detail. As I said, it's kind of Romeo and Juliet down in the holler. You've got Sadie, our leading lady, our soprano, who is a disciple, and you have Micah. Micah's just from the other side of the pond, and Micah is a true light. And therein we can exchange disciple and true light for Capulet and Montague here, right? So at the top of the opera, we meet two other folk. Remember I said there were four in the opera. Aunt Sue and her brother Jess are out having an average work day. Jess has just come in from the cotton field and he's taking a break, and Aunt Sue's going about her daily chores and taking care of things. Sue, we discover, is very worried about Sadie keeping her mind on graduating from school. She's very proud of Sadie and she wants her to succeed, and she wants her to graduate from school and have some kind of a future rather than just being a farmer. She's concerned that her mind is on Micah Hatfield, that true light from across the pond. But let's let that pass for the time being. Jess goes back to the field, he takes his hoe and heads out to the cotton field, and Sue goes out to the garden and back of the house to pick some vegetables and then start tonight's supper. In comes our leading lady and her hero, our Romeo and Juliet, Sadie and Micah. Sadie's just come home from school and Micah likes to meet with her and catch up with her at the bus stop and walk her home. They come through and they start to have a discussion. Micah's really excited about being a farmer. He wants Sadie to join him and have a life together. And Sadie, of course, has had just enough education to realize this farming business, especially in the foothills, or the sandhills, the sandhills, you're always planting corn and cotton and nothing but sand, and you can't get anything to grow. As a matter of fact, Carlyle Floyd in the beginning of the story talks about this almost barren wasteland where you had a few scrub pines and maybe things like that, but it was really hard to make things grow. And since Sadie's going to school, she's really anxious to try and build a life for herself that's something's larger. But she also loves Micah Hatfield. And Micah's so earnest and honest about wanting to build a life together and be a great farmer that he says to Sadie, "Won't you marry me and we'll have a life together?" And after a little bit of thinking and a little bit of convincing from the earnest Micah Hatfield, she agrees. She says she's going to marry him. And no sooner does that happen when we hear Aunt Sue's voice from behind the house. She starts singing, of course, one of her favorite hymns. So Micah says, whoa, I know your Aunt Sue doesn't like me, so I'm going to run back home. Actually, I'm going to go fishing for a little while. I'm going to leave you to tell Aunt Sue about us getting married. So off Micah goes to the fishing hole, and Sue stays and tries to Sadie stays and tries to explain to her aunt what's going to happen. Her aunt is having no part of it. He is a true light and we're disciples. No disciple ain't never married no true light. They get into a big argument and Sadie runs off. Sue's heartbroken. And then there's an interlude to indicate the passage of time. In that passage of time, something horrible has happened. And we return to Aunt Sue and Jess on the front porch and in the front yard. Their faces tell the story. They've got bad news to tell Sadie. Sadie comes in and asks, "What's the matter?" And Aunt Sue has to tell her, "Micah's dead." Micah went on that fishing trip and he flung his rod and his reel out into the pond, and he got caught on a big gnarly tree root, one of those roots that Carlisle Floyd, the composer, had been warned about his whole life long. He dove under to loosen up his fishing line, and as he did, he got his clothes caught on the tree roots, and he couldn't get loose in time, and he drowned. Sadie's devastated, and she runs off. Sue and Jess just go in for the evening, and they turn their lamps down, and we're left alone with Sadie at the end of the opera, who has the whole final scene to mourn not only the loss of Micah, but also what's left for her and what's left for the rest of her life. And the last words she says in the opera are, "Nothing, nothing." It's a really sad ending, but it's so beautifully written. Carlisle Floyd, when he was studying composition as a young man, he was very clear. If he was going to write opera, he was going to write the kind of opera that he thought was beautiful. He wanted to write beautiful melodies, and he was writing at a time when people weren't so much writing that kind of music. It was a more academic style of music. And he just wasn't interested in going there. If he couldn't write beautiful music, he wasn't going to be that interested in writing at all. Throughout his career, he stuck to that premise, and he has always written beautiful music, and it's wonderful right now to see what's happening with the music of Carlisle Floyd. He's really kind of he's in his 90s now. He's written 11 different operas. He just wrote his last opera several years ago. So just like perhaps one of his heroes, Verdi, late into his life, he's still composing opera. His last opera was called The Prince of Players, and it was about an earlier theatrical character and the way that he developed comedy through the Commedia dell'arte and things like that. But he's also set a lovely version of Wuthering Heights. So he has a pretty thorough sort of everything from Susanna and Slow Dusk, which explores his background as a Southerner, all the way through classics of modern literature. Lots of beautiful music there. And again, if you're curious to know what Carlisle Floyd sounds like, I encourage you to YouTube search "Ain't It a Pretty Night," and you'll find Renee Fleming's beautiful, beautiful recording of that to give you a taste of the music that you're about to hear. It's really beautiful stuff, and I know that you're going to enjoy it. Speaking of beautiful things, I am excited to welcome our first guest today to La Lunch, the Dish on Opera. I want to invite Phyllis Pensella to take the chair next to me here. Phyllis is a brand new member of the community here in Winston-Salem. So I hope you'll all help me welcome Phyllis to the table. Thanks so much for being here.
Cheers.
Yes, we're all, let's give our second commercial for Footnote, because we're all here enjoying a beverage thanks to Footnote. Y'all should come down here and do the same thing soon. We're grateful to Footnote for giving us this space and for letting us have La Lunch, the Dish on Opera, as we always do.
Oh.
So, commercial. She likes it. Hey, Mikey. So, Phyllis, welcome to Winston-Salem.
Happy to be here.
How
Thank
long
you.
have you been a resident of Winston-Salem?
2 months.
2 months, yes. Phyllis has just joined the voice faculty at the North Carolina School of the Arts, and I immediately went to her and asked her if she would consider singing Aunt Sue. So now think about this, folks, for a minute. She's lived here for 2 months, she's unpacking boxes, and Pushy Jamie goes, "Hey Phyllis, welcome to Winston-Salem. Want to work for the opera company?"
I said, sure, if you can find my flannel pillowcases, because I can't find them. They're in a box someplace. I've got my sheets, but not my pillowcases. No, it's a great opportunity. I didn't know the piece, and it's a role that suits me vocally, and I keep hearing how great you are as a conductor and a director, so this was
And now you
a great
know that
shot.
was a big lie. So,
Excuse me, I have to take another sip.
while you're sipping, let me ask you, Phyllis, you have been quoted as saying, opera kind of chose you, and it wasn't necessarily your career in your coming up. tell us about how opera chose you, or tell us about what you originally thought you might do.
I was never very good at that whole imagine where you're going to be in 5 years or 10 years thing. I close your eyes and picture what. I couldn't do it. I never could do it. But I knew that opera was weird. My parents would listen to the Met broadcasts on Saturday afternoon, and I would run screaming from the room. I just thought it was a ridiculous thing to do with the human voice. And then it turned out, boom, that's the voice that I was given. So, karma can get you very early in life as well as late in life. I just started getting to know it as a theater art. I was lucky enough to be in my first professional opera at Opera Theater St. Louis. The first opera I saw was the first opera I was in. And I understood, because of the work that they were doing there in the intimate space at the Loretto Hilton, that this was theater, that you could act and sing, that you could tell stories and sing. So that appealed to me because I loved doing theater. So I took that interest and the voice that I came out with and put them together and said, well, I'll try this for 5 years.
and that was
35 years later.
Now I'm here to tell you, I'm also an alum of the St. Louis program, and while Phyllis doesn't remember me, I was actually a chorus boy behind her at Opera Theater St. Louis when she sang Kate in Dvorak's The Devil and Kate, and it was a wonderful, first of all, it's a great opera, and Phyllis gave a stunning performance of it. All of us apprentice artists loved watching her in that show.
Tell us about your costume.
Oh yes, I had a tail, I had a very long tail, and I had horns on my head in the second act. What happened to my tail, you don't need to know, but let's just leave it at that, shall we? But that space is a particularly lovely space for someone who combines theater, thinks about theater as much as the voice. It's a 700-seat house, and it's a thrust theater stage, so it's only about the size of a postage stamp. So you really get to speak to your audience, and what a wonderful way to start your career or transition into your opera career.
I don't think I would have been as intrigued by the whole art form had I not had that way in.
Yeah.
I think the other would have been just too bombastic for me.
Yeah.
And then I got to know bombastic because I worked for the Chicago Lyric for many years, and that's, then you get the big scale version.
Now we should say that we're live streaming the opera, so there are cameras involved, but this is not your first time at singing American opera in front of a camera, is it?
Oy vey. Thanks for the memory. I just was thinking about quick changes last night and had a traumatic flashback to Lizzie Borden when the live from Lincoln Center, and the final big costume change that didn't make it.
Oh.
And so I spent the whole coda of the piece trying to hold my skirt together so that we didn't see my petticoat. It was ghastly.
So
that was quite an experience.
Let me just fill in the blank here. Phyllis was in a production of Jack Beeson's operatic version of Lizzie Borden at New York City Opera. And that was on television as part of the Live from Lincoln Center series. So we have a veteran of American opera in front of the camera, and this time she has no costume changes, so she can be a little bit more. She just got to put a lamp out. That's all she got to do.
There's also no blood.
There are no axes.
This time.
There's no blood.
Axes. No writhing on the floor yet.
Yet. We're not done yet. That's good to know that you do writhing.
I have done writhing.
But you've also done a pretty significant amount of American opera. Again, that I'm attracted to the theatrical aspect of it. What is it? I mean, there are lots of things that are attractive about American opera. What appeals to you specifically?
I like to be there at the beginning of things. That's always fun, or it's often fun. I can't say always. And of course, being able to connect through our common language. That also is difficult, though.
Yes.
It's difficult to make oneself clear in English while singing classically.
Yeah.
And that's something that takes a lot of thought and work, and probably can cost something if one isn't careful.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've had great opportunities. In fact, I got to do Kamala Sankaram's piece, Thumbprint, on the West Coast, and it's in English, and it's written by an American, but it's a Pakistani story. So you get to access the world in new works. And I get to access composers from a much more diverse community by doing American opera.
Yeah, yeah. But since this is Phyllis's sort of intro to the opera world here in Winston, what are some of your favorite roles? Are any of them some of those big grand opera girls, or what are your favorite opera roles that you have essayed?
I will never regret the time I spent as Carmen. I spent a lot of time as Carmen, but I was careful about it because I had a feeling that if I took every Carmen that came my way, that I'd get tired of her, because there's so much mediocre Carmen out there. So I never got tired of her. Never got tired of her. Loved it, loved it, loved it. A favorite that came along late for me was Sesto in La Clemenza di Tito, and Nero in Coronation of Poppaea.
Oh yeah, cool.
So I do good man.
Now, does
Is there
everybody...
any good way of saying that?
Just to be clear,
No,
She
let's
isn't-
leave it in the spirit.
that's not about how she got the job. That is about... as we've said many times, mezzos play, especially in our Opera Talk series, mezzos often play pants roles, so they play the roles of men. And so that's what she's speaking of, is that the last two roles were both roles that were written either for castrati or for mezzo-sopranos to play what we call in opera pants roles. It's Cherubino in the Marriage of Figaro. It's only that's a younger version of it in this case.
Right, and I enjoy it because we all have qualities, we all have masculine and feminine qualities, and so as an actor, I enjoy exploring and pretending to take on, Nero, please. Who would not want to play Nero? So to have a crack at that, and Ronaldo and those kinds of things, that was pretty great.
That's cool. Now you've also spent a fair amount of time doing, you mentioned it, you're enjoying now getting to know newer composers and chamber music and things like that as well, in addition to opera.
Oh yeah, that's always been there.
Yeah.
In fact, very early on, I saw or I felt that there was a kind of diminishment of singers by the sort of chamber music world. This sense that singers couldn't be chamber musicians. They would just be sort of ornamental periodically when you wanted to do something in particular. And I fought to disprove that. And as a result, I had to up my game musically. And so I did do a lot of chamber music. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Still enjoy it.
So we're only a few days into rehearsal on Slow Dusk, and again, I know that seems odd to those of you that are used to La Lunch, but we've sort of compressed rehearsal period for COVID as well. If you don't have to be in a room with 4 singers singing all the time, let's not do that. So we're trying to be as economical as we can. Having said all of that, how you feel about Aunt Sue? Do you like her? Do you like her music?
Yeah.
Do you like her?
I do, yeah.
What
No
appeals to
question.
you about this piece?
I like how direct it is. My initial reaction, sometimes when something is very short, you have to skip a lot of emotional steps. And my first reaction to the piece was that it has to do that. In order to say what he wanted to say, he had to condense some things that normally we would be able to expand on. And I think that you are fixing that very well with some of the video stuff that you're doing. And that's kind of the gig, when you're doing any piece, you are filling in some of the things that didn't quite make it onto the paper. So when I look just at the score, I think, ooh, is that going to make any sense? Is that gonna do what he's trying to do dramatically? And then you come along and you fill it in, and I come along and I fill it in, and the other performers put the flesh on the bones of the piece, and the bones are very good. They're very beautiful and very compelling. So yeah, I think it's gonna work, and I think I understand her very well. She's somebody that has worked hard her whole life. She has some hope for this young woman who has been in her charge, to move beyond what the rest of the family has been able to accomplish. And then she sees that possibly crumbling, but she also sympathizes with her emotional needs. Oh yeah, it's very rich.
Yeah, it really is. But I must put credit where credit is due. You heard what Phyllis just described. Her Aunt Sue is rich because Phyllis is playing it. It's a pleasure to work with her in rehearsals because even though we've just only spent a few hours in rehearsals, she's making things up, she's bringing things to the table. There's a lot going on behind that mask in rehearsals, I'll tell you that. I'm looking forward to seeing it without a mask. Phyllis, I know she's got to get back to her students at UNCSA, but Phyllis, thank you so much for dropping by. And again, I hope when we're all together in person, you will welcome Phyllis Pensella to Winston-Salem and to our musical community. Thanks so much for joining us today,
Thanks.
Phyllis. I really appreciate it.
Good to see you.
And thanks so much for being a part of our cast as well.
My pleasure.
What a bonus, what a bonus. So that's half of our opera wrapped up in a nutshell. Now let's talk a little bit about our other opera, which is a premiere. It's a brand new creation thanks to my friend Ken Frizzell. So a few words about Ken Frizzell as a composer. I hope that many of you are familiar with Ken's music. If you're not, let me just give you a description. And as I do, I'm going to warn you, as we are exploring new technologies here, we are changing batteries right now in our cameras. So it is my understanding that you'll keep hearing my voice, but the screen will go dark for a moment. So don't worry, you haven't lost your connection as long as you can hear my voice. And my ever faithful AV girl, Meredith, is almost ready to put that new freshly charged battery in the camera so we can finish up talking about Ken Frizzell. Look at that. Y'all will let me know when we have a picture again, right? And she's almost got it, you know, because this is, again, welcome to COVID. We're exploring ideas as we go. There's just as we hear the air conditioning unit click on one more time, I'm going to assume that you're still with me, and I'm going to start to talk about Ken Frizzell. Thanks for hanging out with us, folks. So, let me share with you a quote about Ken's music. This is from the San Francisco Examiner. The newspaper says his music came straight from and went straight to the heart, an organ too seldom accessed by contemporary composers. I love that quote. I think it sums up so much about Ken's music. Ken, like Mr. Floyd, Ken is a product of the Carolinas. We can claim him from North Carolina, actually, and even closer, we can claim him as a graduate of then NCSA, where he went to high school, and he studied with our own Robert Ward. He has very fond, when we did The Crucible, I hope some of you will remember that. When we did that, he had some very fond memories of Dr. Ward that he shared with us. And we also played some of his music on a memorial concert for Dr. Ward. And I remember him saying to me at that concert, what I was really struck by was that he challenged me so much, and he really expected me to function on a really high level. Which obviously Ken did, because he went from high school at NCSA to the Juilliard to study with Roger Sessions. Now, Roger Sessions is a very academic composer, and I don't say that to cast aspersions, but that was the musical flavor of the day. Mr. Ward's music has sort of had, at that moment, sort of fallen out of favor, and Mr. Sessions' music was very much in the ascent. But it was music that, I'm going to be a little subjective here and say it wasn't necessarily audience friendly. And initially, Ken's music went after his teacher, of course, like any student would. And then things shifted a little bit. And he began to consider, well, I'll read another quote about Ken's music because I think it continues to describe it so beautifully. It says, Kenneth Frizzell's music is rooted in the folk melodies of his native North Carolina. But like Bartok and Copeland, his work finally transcends its simple sources to become high art. I think that's a really fantastic quote, and I think it sums up exactly what you're going to hear in our performances coming up. Ken has written for artists internationally, nationally. He's written for everyone from Yo-Yo Ma to Odetta. He came on the international scene when he was writing a piece called Still Here that he worked out with Bill T. Jones. So he's no stranger to dance, even though this piece is new and was not commissioned by a ballet, but his music certainly has that in mind. So I'm just so excited to have a chance to turn his folk songs into a theater piece. So let's talk a little bit about exactly that. Ken's folk songs, as I said earlier, are all sort of mini operas in my mind. And what I did is I went to Ken, asked him if this was a good idea, and he said, you just do it. I trust you. Just do it, like Ken does. He's very humble about his very significant talent. So I said, okay, Ken, here we go. And I chose 9 of his folk songs, and I'll read you the titles. In East Virginia, Charmin' Birdie, Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss, Bonnie Blue Eyes, Naomi Wise, which is a wonderful narrative folk story, Our Good Man, which is really a burlesque about a drunken gentleman coming home, finding his wife up to something. The Cuckoo, which is a very heart-wrenching tale of a lonely woman. And finally, Sally Ann. Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss and Sally Ann I chose because it gives the dancers a real chance to well, just as the title says, fly around the stage and show us something besides just that narrative side. The rest of these songs all have a kind of they tell a story, if you will. And what I've created within this is the characters in it are he and she. And they divide up the he and she, the tasks of telling these stories. For example, with Naomi Wise, which is the center of this piece. Naomi Wise is a story that's actually true. It's about a girl here in North Carolina. You can still go to visit her gravesite, and there are road markers explaining what happened to poor Naomi. Naomi Wise fell in love with a fella, and the fella was cruel to her. He offered to take her away, to marry her, and instead drowned her in the deep river. And so I have divided he and she, in this case, up into he is John Lewis, the fellow that drowned Naomi Wise, and of course she is Naomi Wise, and between he and she the story is told. That's musically. Then on stage, we have 7 dancers who will tell that narrative story. And again, I tip my hat to Gary Taylor and the Winston-Salem Festival Ballet. I haven't seen their work yet, but Gary's explained to me what he's doing, and it's going to be really exciting. He's got some wonderful ideas, including the way that we're going to get to see poor Naomi drown. It's going to be something else. I'm so looking forward to it. So these vignettes continue through he and she, and the dancers take on, these 7 dancers, each of them take on sort of different roles. So it's not going to be an evening's story through the 9 songs. Each song is like a snapshot. Here is one picture, here's another picture, and the dancers will all help us to bring that picture to life. Now I want to invite somebody else to come talk about these songs a little bit with me. I haven't mentioned the accompaniment to any of these performances, and I will now. When Mr. Floyd wrote his opera, Slow Dusk, he was a 22-year-old composer, and he didn't have access to an orchestra. He orchestrated his piece years later in 1955, but at its premiere, he played at the piano, served as piano and maestro all at once. So when we perform Slow Dusk, it's in its original performance conception with just piano accompaniment. And obviously for Ken's songs, they were originally written for the recital hall, so they were originally written with piano and voice in mind. So all night long, we have pianists filling in for the orchestra. Our stalwart ever at the ready, Nancy Johnston, will be the pianist for the first half of our performance of Slow Dusk. But I am thrilled to invite to share the table with me now a new pianist to Piedmont Opera audiences, P.G. Hazard. PG, come on up and join me at the table. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So this is half of our orchestra for the operas that we're going to perform. Pretty efficient, isn't it? PG, I thought it was a lot of work to ask one pianist to have to do all of that, and I think that's a fair assessment, don't you, PG?
I would agree. I haven't really looked at Slow Dusk, but I mean, both pieces are such a different type of beast that to go from one to the other, it's already so much brain work for one piece to do that for the whole evening. I think would be a heavy load.
And notice how she described them as being beasts. I'm just saying. They both quite literally have their hands full. First of all, before we get into the piece, PG, tell us a little bit about you, because how did I get to know you?
Well, I believe we first met in 2016 when I needed your help for an audition. I moved to Winston-Salem in 2016 to do my master's work. I believe I was the first collaborative pianist to work with the Fletcher Opera Institute, which was why I came here. It was really exciting.
So just to unpack that a little bit, guys, you got to realize there is a role in the opera house called a coach, or an assistant conductor. That the Metropolitan Opera would call them assistant conductors. So a coach conductor is somebody who is obviously very proficient at the keyboard because they can play orchestral reductions of operas, but they also have to be proficient in language, have to be able to sing cues back and forth to singers. So for example, if I want to learn a role, let's say I'm going to learn Parsifal. How's that for crazy? So I'm going to go to PG and say, PG, you got to help me, I got to learn Parsifal. So PG's job is to learn the role of Parsifal for me so she can correct all my mistakes. And then when I come to coach with her, she has to play the orchestral reduction and she has to sing to me all the other parts so that I get used to figuring out how it goes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You ready for it? We'll have another live stream of her teaching me Parsifal.
Oh my God. In 10 years.
Yeah, that's a pay-per-view and it starts at $10,000.
I'd do it though for that.
No, I would not. We'll just put a camera on PG and she can play and sing to silence. No. So that's why PG came here initially, and she was the first one at the Fletcher Opera Institute at the School of the Arts to take a position like that. And she's absolutely right. I wasn't at the school at the time, but her teacher, Alison Gagnon, said, could you, as a conductor, just give PG a little advice? And we worked on the second act finale to The Marriage of Figaro.
That's right.
And that's how I got to know PG, and I am just tickled that she's back here in Winston-Salem. You were away for a while working, weren't you?
Yeah, I took a apprenticeship at Palm Beach Opera for 5 months. It was from November to March, which is funny how that time worked out. And I think I always knew I'd come back to Winston-Salem at some point. So instead of visiting, I've moved back, which is great. I'm happy to be back because I originally hail from Florida. I'm from the Daytona Beach area, and there's really not opera there. So it's much more fruitful to be here with the people I know making music. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's extraordinarily fruitful right now, and it's our good. Again, it's another one of those, just like these one acts that we're producing right now. It's another one of those little COVID miracles where COVID struck and you had to leave Palm Beach and you came back here to Winston-Salem, and a few months later I say, so PG, what you doing? And here we are, happily so. She's doing a fantastic job. So I'll ask you several questions. One, Ken's come to rehearsal.
Yeah.
Ken Frizzell has listened to all of us. I should parenthetically add, I hope this doesn't seem self-serving, the he and the she is Jody Burns, and the he is not the one that's not singing Parsifal, it's me. So and then that makes it clear why he is not doing that. So the three of us have all been in rehearsal with Ken, and of course Ken wrote the piano part. He is a pianist. He was actually, he was very giddy because it was one of the first times that he's been rehearsing his folk songs and not been at the keyboard. So what's it like having the guy that wrote the notes over your shoulder?
Honestly, it's a priceless experience, because what we do in this field all the time is try to imagine what these composers were thinking, and to have that person in the room and giving you feedback is literally priceless.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's heritage. We're learning the ins and outs of these pieces, and we get to ask questions, and Ken's such a nice guy and so like easy to get along with, and his music's gorgeous. So this is like my dream project. So I'm just thrilled. It's going really well.
You heard her say his music is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yes, you can take that to the bank.
He said in rehearsal, the way we talked about how other people describe Ken's music, but Ken himself describes his music as having this glow around it, which I think is perfect.
Yes, I agree. So now let's get down to the technical matter of it. Easy to play?
Some of it is, well, okay, this is my story. At first glance, I went, no problem, beautiful, easy, whatever, simple. No, simple never means easy. So that was my mistake. And then as I further investigated, I went, okay, I was completely incorrect with my assessment.
But she said yes by then.
Yeah, well, regardless, I was happy to do it. So some of it it's all worth it, is what I'll say. It's not all easy, but it's all worth it. There's definitely a fiddle tune, the last song we do, that is rip-roaring and just very, very challenging, but it's really fun.
Well, it's good that you mention that, because, when you're playing in instrumental reduction, as you frequently are as a coach accompanist
Right.
playing opera rehearsals, you're consulting the full score, you're looking at the conductor's score,
Yeah.
which instrument plays that melody so that it informs the choices you make. In this case, there is no orchestral score, but you are actually imitating occasionally instruments.
Yeah, there's a pressure gets moved from one side to the other. So when you're doing orchestral things, there's too many notes and you can't play them all. So you have to make those decisions. In this case, there's no decisions on that end. So you have to play everything and make that it's a different type of work.
What are some of the instruments that Ken asks you to sound like?
Well, he himself told me to add in some cellos in one place, which is cool. And then I mentioned there's a fiddle piece, and we talked about a tub bass sort of, I don't know, trio.
Yeah, she has to be.
sorts.
She is her own piano trio in one of the songs, the very last song in the set, Sally Ann, because her left hand is kind of, I can't keep tempo very squarely, wash tub bass. And at the same time, she's being a mad fiddle player up on the top there.
Yeah.
Charlie Daniels would be very proud of her fiddle playing.
Yeah.
But then there's another song where he said, no, I want to hear the banjo.
Yeah, the banjo. I forgot about the banjo. Yeah, and what's cool is, as I was doing some research and listening to these folk songs in some of their original forms, the second I went back to go play Fly Around My Pretty Little Miss, I went, it's banjo music. It has the rhythm of a banjo piece. I think it's why I started playing it as fast as possible, because when you hear banjos, they just ding, 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 ding. So yeah, all these kind of folk instruments, which is exciting.
We should say, as PG brings up, the beauty of Ken's folk songs are, you're going to recognize-ish some of them. They're close. They're close to what you're used to. But Ken actually, in one of the descriptions that I read to you, they compared him to Bartók. Bartók, in his native Hungary, he traveled the countrysides because there was what was considered gypsy music and folk music, and it was all sort of stereotyped, scrubbed, clean versions of these tunes. And Bartók said, no, I want to know what I want to feel the earth in these songs. So he went around out into the countryside and transcribed these melodies, and is known for volumes of folk songs. Ken kind of did the same thing. He went to his grandmother and his great uncle, and he said, I know y'all sing these North Carolina folk songs. And they said, I don't know what you're talking about, you're silly. And he said, well, okay, here's a recorder. If you think about it, just tape record yourself singing some of these songs. And he told us that they sent him back a manila envelope full of cassette tapes. And so what he's done is transcribe exactly the melodies that his relatives were singing to him, and those become the basis of his folk songs. So they really are rooted in the very ground that we walk on here in North Carolina. And that's just really exciting to be a part of. And then to turn around and turn it into a theater piece on top of that. I'm tickled that PG is here with us, because that also leads us to another piece of this whole performance. who knew when Meredith started talking to us about all last season, we were talking about local, local, local. Who knew that we were headed into a pandemic like this?
Yeah.
And so we have just all kinds of local talent assembled for this, from PG to Nancy to Winston-Salem Festival Ballet to all of the singers involved, some of whom are making debuts with Piedmont Opera, but all of them are from our community. It's just really exciting to be a part of this. As I said I had to write something the other day, and I said, you know, this pandemic may have closed our theaters, but it also may have opened a door for us here at Piedmont Opera. Mm-hmm. And I am so excited about this. I'm so excited that you're a part of it, PG. What else do we need to say about Ken's songs before we let everybody go?
They're really fun. Like, it's a fun time. You know, nothing gets too heavy. Naomi Wise, of course, is like a ballad, and you know, these songs all deal with very simple and truthful stories. I think.
Yes.
They're very easy to get behind and understand and connect with.
Yeah, and again, you have the benefit of we're singing the lyrics while there will not be super titles or subtitles. They're dancing the story. So even if our diction is not stellar, and PG as the coach, she'll keep us on our toes with that, right? That's her job. But even if our diction is not stellar, you ain't got to worry about it. The story's right there on the stage. Yeah. And that's the one thing that Gary Taylor is a master of, is telling stories in a truly narrative fashion. So I think they just should come, don't you?
I agree. You can sit on your couch and watch this beautiful music. Like, what more could you ask
Your
for?
seat is already chosen for you.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for just a second before we let you go. So you can go to piedmontopera.org, or you can call our office, 725-7101. But the easiest thing to do is go to piedmontopera.org, buy your ticket. Our ticketing service will then give you a code, and when comes the day, you just click on that code using whatever means you want to, whether it's Chromecast, whether you want to go through your web browser, and boom, you'll be at the live stream. And you will have the best seat in the house, the one that you choose, and you'll be able to enjoy our work from the comfort of your home. If you have any questions about that, we'll be putting up more information on our website soon, trying to help you in terms of the technical aspects of this. And you can always call the office as well, and we'll do our best to help you with the technical aspects of this. But our hope is that it will be very simple. Our hope is that you will all consider joining us either on Friday evening, October 16th at 8 o'clock, or Sunday afternoon, October 18th at 2 o'clock. We are not filming. We are going live. Again, trying to maintain as much normalcy as we can. I didn't want to make a film. I didn't want to fix it. When you come to the opera, you're seeing live. That's part of the thrill, is how are they going to get through it? And we're still on that same thrill of a live ride. When we give that first downbeat, you're seeing exactly what's happening in the Stevens Center as if you were there. So we look forward to seeing you on the other side of our cameras in the Stevens Center as we bring to you Echoes from Carolina. PG, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon, and thank you for being 50% of the orchestra for Echoes from Carolina. We look forward to seeing you then. We should do one more commercial for Footnote. Don't forget our friends here at Footnote that have been so generous to us to let us have our normal La Lunch, the dish on opera, from their space. I hope we'll see you down here. If you do, let us know. We'll cross across the street, put our mask on, and join you for a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. Until then, and until Echoes from Carolina, have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon. Exactly. Another cup of coffee.
What are you drinking?
Hazelnut latte.
Me too.